Making with the live stream. Maybe a little early since,
People are busy today.
Yes.
Speaking of security incidents.
It's generally the idea.
Oh, what was called?
I picked a good month to take time off between jobs.
You really did.
Usually a good plan anyway, right?
Well, yeah, but I was on a team that was managing many Elastic clusters.
Mm.
And I'm not having to remediate any of them.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I do not have a SAD.
Or a cry party.
Oh, my cry party now is I have to repave my cube cluster in the home lab because reasons, and I ended up just trashing it to write up an article for this event, and now I have to put stuff back on it.
Indeed. It's John Vincent.
It is I. What's up, y'all?
Hey. Well,
Good
Can't seem to push buttons today. What's that?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
not quite. I got another hour for that here.
Yeah, you need to get in the right time zone.
I am in the right time zone.
Jesus doesn't love anybody but EST. I'm telling you, man.
We like this time zone. This time zone is good.
Yeah, there's mountains in this time zone.
Yes.
Who needs mountains?
And
my time zone has a mountain. We have one.
It's very nice to be east of the main office. So, you get that hour or two in when nobody is there to bother you.
Yeah,
Oh, that's lovely.
Alma is all over the place, but mostly East Coast. There's
that's the wrong direction.
It does mean that I wake up to Slack notifications. Hey, Scott.
Joshua. Hi, everybody.
Howdy.
Just give another minute or so. Let people folk trickle in. Triple? We could triple. That'd be pretty dope. Like 18 people in here would be amazing.
I think this is the first HangOps I've ever actually been able to make it to. So
Nice.
I'm not cracking a beer, by the way. I just needed another soda.
Why not?
We don't judge.
Yeah, Coke made it look really bad because like the Coke Zero cans now look like the original Coke cans. So it looks like I go through a bunch of sugar soda all day, and I don't. It's zero sugar, but whatever.
Yeah.
For some reason, they thought that soda needed to be gendered, so they went with like we want to attract people. So I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Sugar. Yeah, I mean that's the rules of sugar water, right?
So many rules about sugar water.
Sugar water is the prime source of all marketing.
So
I thought it was corn syrup. I thought corn syrup was the prime source.
I will say,
but that's a Midwest thing, not an East Coast thing.
One of the best parts of log4j is that the conversion of it into a like handy CVE moniker as log4 shell was really like, one, I noticed it immediately, and two, it's just like, oh, this is so nice and easy to talk about. Like I can just tell, like point to people, and go like, well, it's the log4 shell thing. Here you go.
No, it's
Log4j.
Log4j.
Pete has given
Why is
his
Pete thumbing down here?
disapproval.
The log forge.
You just forge your
That's how you
logs.
pronounce it.
Well, one of the things that I told Joshua that we should do is put together a list of open source like pieces of software, like things that don't have like a defined pronunciation,
Mhm.
and just show them to people and have them pronounce them. Like you pronounce like this word, because like my guess is we're gonna find dozens of scenarios that people have their own pronunciation for things just based on whatever.
It's like fantasy novels and fantasy character names, right? Like nobody knows how they're pronounced until it's like made into a movie.
I mean,
Yeah, and then
it's
you realize you're doing it wrong.
there was a distinct
There's a silent
moment.
letter in there.
I feel like every fantasy author should get a shock for every piece of punctuation they stick into a main character name.
Oh, it's Elvish. There's like 3 commas in there.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I think we have we're 5 minutes in. I think we've got a quorum, at least for now, until maybe some other folks will join us. So thanks everybody for joining. Today, in light of our recent vulnerability in log4j, I'd like to spend some time chatting with all y'all about security incidents and the ways that people handle those in their organizations. So I've got some questions I can ask folks, or if anybody wants to volunteer, like a way that you like get notified and handle a security thing like log4j or
You mean
log4
Twitter's
Java.
not the way that people find out their shit's broken?
Is it? I mean, maybe it is. I actually have a slide about that in my incident management materials.
Yeah, at a previous job, my manager's answer to that would have been poorly, because he was very real. He was a realist. I got to give him that.
Yeah. Do we all just hope that somebody in the team is paying attention to the CVE mailing list?
In a small company, yeah. In a big company, hopefully there's a team that comes and nags you.
Yeah.
But sometimes you tell them things because you saw it on ops Twitter.
Right. Yeah. Or in HangOps.
Yeah. HangOps is the real status page for AWS.
I thought that's Cry Party.
Yeah, well, that's on HangOps.
Exactly.
What are you guys talking about? Is there a vulnerability or something? Anything going on recently?
I think there was an AWS
Holy
outage
shit.
last week.
You killed JV.
Yeah, I'm dead now. I have
Hey,
fallen.
Liz-
I won't be able to get up.
At least we don't have any Java in our stack, John.
So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
We do. You just didn't know it. We transitively have Java in our stack because we use Amazon's hosted version of ActiveMQ.
Oh.
So somewhere down the line, eventually,
There's
maybe we
it's
name a
always there.
topic. Maybe we name a topic, root shell, and that's how you get into Amazon's infrastructure. Like that's how you figure out what's actually happening in those black boxes. You just use exploits.
Yeah, just use exploits. Yeah, there's nothing shady or bad or against the terms of service there.
I mean, like
But
even
Amazon
as
did inform us that we were okay. So
even as a Java shop, I mean, one of the things that was amazing to me in like the wake of this is how many of our vendors are just intermittent outages all morning long. But from whether it be like Okta or one of our other vendors, just like everybody watching the entire net go through the same sort of convulsion as the everything gets deployed.
Wait, Ben, are you talking about log4j or are you talking about the AWS outage?
Log4j, although the AWS outage was also very exciting and also showed us how many of our vendors are on the same shit.
Right?
Which
Yeah.
AWS outage?
I pick one. There was the one last week.
Yes.
Yeah,
Was
the
there
one
one
last
this
week or the
morning?
one that's I
This
think
morning.
still
Or is it
happening.
still going now?
Yeah, it's still ongoing, but it's not. I think it's US Bus 2, so it's not my problem.
Because
There
you're
was
not in that
legit
region.
somebody that I follow on Twitter who last week was like said something to the effect of, well, at least it's US West 1. I mean, it's not US West 2 where I have all my stuff. And then like today they
it's his
tweeted,
fault.
I did this. I did this.
You had to go
Oh,
and open your
goodness.
mouth, right? Like,
Oh my goodness. Right.
Yeah.
It's so true.
I think the interesting thing about this log4j thing is I know a lot of shops and a lot of Java shops had moved on from log4j. Like they started using logback or SLF4j or these other alternatives. But because of how dependencies work, you might still have something in your dependency chain that's using log4j to log. And so, yeah. Ugly.
Yeah.
Please pronounce it correctly. Silforge.
Wow. Wow.
Oh.
John's dead. Way to go, Scott. You killed John.
I'm spent. I can't handle this. This was a whole mistake. No, this is a mistake.
Good morning. Welcome to HangOps.
Oh my Lord. It's actually funny because you talk about how people like mispronounce things, and it's a running gag here in the house because there were words that I only read when I was a kid that I never actually heard.
Mhm.
And my wife's favorite story is hers was the word chauffeur. The person who drives the car, the chauffeur.
Yeah, the chauffeur.
Yeah, there's a I can't remember. It's not a syndrome, but there's a specific term for like readers where you only read the word and so you don't know how to pronounce it. My favorite one for myself was, and this was up until I was like in my 30s, until my partner was like, what are you talking about? Was I referred to something as a grim facade, and she was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a grim facade." And she was like, "Do you mean a grim facade?" It's like,
No, I don't speak French.
No, I'm not facade.
yeah.
As an American, it's facade.
I said
the
what I
other-
said.
my other
that's how you
favorite one
respond.
was not mine. It was a friend of mine's, and I'm not going to say it because it's this is a family show, but
Somewhat.
But let's just say that he pronounced the word vague in a way that was not safe for work.
Gonna have to use that.
I'm not.
Just for fun.
Wow, yeah. Yeah.
So, back to technicals.
Yes.
Has anybody had to deal out with the fallout of the log4j thing, or was it just
Yeah, well, so
without
like,
disclosing any like we're vulnerable, please hack us?
Are you
No,
serious,
I-
Clark? Are you serious, Clark? Yes, everyone's had to deal with this.
I'm actually curious, like how people are determining whether they're affected, right? Like we know ActiveMQ, Elasticsearch on AWS are things that, if you're using those, then there could be like a transitive dependency that you have there. But like, how else are people determining that they're actually affected?
And do you have to like restart stuff? Because like,
Yes.
man, if I was running, I am definitely not, but if I was running the like hundreds of Elasticsearch clusters I used to and had to like
Yeah.
rolling restart those MFs.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Like, yeah. So how does it work? How does the modern world work?
It was really unpleasant. I mean, our shops were a heavily Java-based shop. We got word of the CVE sort of late on, what was it, Thursday of last week, something like that. And we basically, because we know that we're using log4j in a lot of places, it's built into like a bunch of our application runtimes. So the first thing we did is we went ahead and ran the mitigation while we determined what level of what needed to happen, right? Building out the workflow of like, all right, what are the services affected? What level of effort needs to go into it? Thankfully, it was all fairly simple. And then, we just started rebuilding everything for the new versions, redeploying it all, going through all of that and then doing it across all of our environments. So, I mean, thankfully, we're not a huge shop. I mean, we're larger, but not that big. Not large enough to have an active InfoSec group, but large enough to, that we have enough engineers who are security minded that we were on top of this and, we're able to get out all of our patches really fast. That said, was it like super unpleasant finding out that we have to rebuild every service that we operate? Yeah. And then figuring out all of the newly developing, like all of the nascent services or stuff that was sort of in development, going to each one of those teams and being like, hey, y'all, like, what frameworks are y'all using? Can I talk to you about your logger? Have you heard the good word?
It's not a good word.
And then going through all of our hosted services, because we have a lot of internal tooling, and so like it was then so like my team basically was sort of halved in terms of manpower, while people peeled off to take care of various sections of the infrastructure, and that way we could try and cover everything. But even then it was like having to run the plan back 3 times was less than ideal. So yeah.
Yeah, so I added it in the chat, and I think somebody, yeah, Nick, you confirmed. Well, one of the things that is super useful for folks, if you want to, I mean, you're probably vulnerable, but if you want to see how bad it is, there's a couple of sites out there that you can generate canary tokens and throw a webhook address at it, and a lot of them actually have the log4shell like tokens set up right there. So you can just go and do that. So yeah, directly from a website or whatever, and point that at stuff. So that's a really great way to look at things. The other thing I wanted to point out, which was really fun, that kind of got lost in the shuffle, is we use a lot of Go where I am, and yeah, there was actually a pretty awesome vulnerability in the version of Go that was released on Friday morning that had to do with HTTP2 and I want to say certificate auth, something of that nature. So yeah, that was really fun as well, to suddenly be like, oh, well, we don't use a lot of Java, but
so
one of my favorite things I heard from a friend of mine, they created a Jira ticket to log this issue with the strings that were found in their IDS, which wasn't the actual problem, because they were like, that one was patched, but then there was a process that takes that data and pushes it to another application that then parses all of that data. And yeah, they like you just played yourself. It was quite hilarious to see.
Yeah, we had an incident where somebody stuck that in a Jira ticket, and the one that they used was pwn.af, and yeah, another system written in Java scrapes Jira tickets for stuff for security.
I'm sure that happened to just like probably dozens, if not hundreds of people, like honestly. Like
yeah, so we use a lot of off-the-shelf software. I support a lot of virtualization, VMware stuff. So we spent the first, our team anyway, we have a lot more in the company, but our team spent like 48 hours just waiting on what we could do to fix it. And in the meantime, people were looking at, oh, let's set up web firewall, application firewall rules and stuff like that. And that was interesting because it's a good idea. And then you started to see all the little wrinkles, like if you do, $brace lower colon L and brace, that just replaces the L that you used with the lowercase L, and your regex doesn't work. And then even when people understood that, somebody then said, well, if you just leave off the trailing brace, it just keeps gobbling information until it finds another curly brace in some future message, and then shares that information in the lookup, whatever it's gathered in between. So trying to convince people that all we could really do was wait for vendor suggestions instead of trying to implement broken fixes ourselves was interesting.
Well, what's really funny is if you front anything with Cloudflare, you got that WAF for free. We were pretty surprised whenever we were running through triage, and like they turn it on for everyone, like free folks, everything. They were like, this is so nasty. Like, boom, everyone gets it.
It was a nice security blanket but it like he just what Rob's just said, like it's, you know, I don't know how robust that rule is.
Yeah, I don't think we encountered any fallout from it, but yeah, zero consent, right? They were just like, this is so gross, this needs to go on, let's go. And then I think they publicly calmed about it a couple hours later.
And I mean, it's not bad to have that implemented, but trying to use that as a metric of like, we nailed it, you know, like it wasn't that case, and then people kind of stopped looking at it, and I had to go, wait a second, we're not really in the clear here. We've narrowed it a little bit, but we're not good.
So we had a coworker who doesn't normally operate in this space, like the ops security kind of space. And the question he asked that led to a really good discussion was, how do people find out about this stuff? We talked about at the beginning, like, how did we all find out? You know, people joking, well, Twitter, right? Like Twitter tells me when my stuff's broken.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, you know, one of the things that I mentioned was that, you know, monitoring CVEs, which there are CVEs all the time. It's like next to impossible to like filter that information. So a lot of times you'll have supply chain security solutions like X-Ray, the JFrog thing, or I think, does Dependabot, the thing from GitHub, do some of that? I think there's a vulnerability scanner for your dependencies and stuff. I'm curious, legitimately, like how would y'all find out about this stuff if not for the massive explosion of information on Twitter? Do you have a solid supply chain security solution? It looks like Cammy's got a hand raised, so I'll go there.
Yeah, I definitely want to put some ideas here because I was on PTO when this happened. And I had to join the work chat and say, this looks nasty. Can someone please take a look? And I had denied myself to access work things during the weekend, but I didn't see anyone talking about it. So I said, probably I'm the only one who knows at this point. And it's really bad. I don't want this to wait until Monday when I'm back at the office. And they checked. Fortunately, we have some technical depth, and we're using 1.x of log4j. There are some Apache projects that are using 1.x. So it's not like it's really bad. It's just that it hasn't been broken. So it hasn't been replaced. And it has the features that we need. So that was good. But then in the middle of the scramble, I said something like, it should not depend on me figuring this out, right? We need some sort of scanning that you can achieve with several different rules. Even GitLab in the ultimate license tier has something. And if you don't want to pay for it, or you can't pay for it, or you need to run it on premise, different business rules that might restrict you from doing things, I went and checked GitHub, and there is a tool called Sift from the Anchor user on GitHub that allows you to pair up with a different tool called Ripe that allows you to scan container images. So if you're fortunate enough to build RPM or .deb artifacts or containers, you can somehow keep track of this and tie your alerts to something that people check every morning or something like that. But this is not off the shelf. You need to code something that works for your pipeline or for your build process. And well, I'm still working on getting the time budget for that because it's not free. And if I write it, it needs to be maintainable for the rest of the organization. It doesn't work if it's just me. So that's like the input I have from the scramble of the weekend. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to share.
I think Scott's got something too. Thank you, Cammy.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good info, Cammy. I gotta run, but going back to the original topic, or what you were asking about, JD, the how do you know when something comes out? There are a couple of ways that are super useful. There's a couple of Twitter bots that announce CVEs. And more importantly, if you want to roll your own, the NVD, the National Vulnerability Database that NIST has, they've got like API. They have an API, they have JSON feed, they have RSS, they have a whole bunch of ways to consume this data that you can like track to. I dropped a link in there as well. And yeah, so that's it's a really good way to consume that. Mileage will vary depending on what you're looking for, and filtering is still kind of a, but yeah, that's super useful. But got a jam. Lovely to see you all. Good luck with all the things.
logs
All
and
the
J's.
things.
Pretty much.
The logs and the J's, yeah.
So does anybody else have any, I have another follow-up question to that, but I'm curious if anybody else had any other tools or how they found out about it outside of Twitter, if at all. Anybody? I think we all just found out about it on
Wait,
Twitter.
there are news sources other than Twitter?
What's that?
Since
There are news
I don't know
sources
how
other than
people.
Twitter?
I don't know how people found out about it on Twitter specifically. I know there's an InfoSec community. I actually found out about it because somebody typed like $paren date paren in Minecraft, and it showed up as the date instead of the word date in the logs. Like that's how I found out about this. I don't know if
wow,
that's how
okay.
everybody else found out.
Huh.
Because apparently the CVE had been out for a few days. That's when it became big, when somebody found it in Minecraft.
Aha.
To be totally clear, this was disclosed at Black Hat in 2016. Like this has been out.
This exact one, or just the stupid replacement logic?
The specifics around Jindy and log4j enumeration. It's
Yikes.
yeah.
So
But
potentially
I
this has
think- I
been
think-
exploited for years.
I think what triggered this though is some like Alibaba vulnerability report more recently, right? Like it was uncovered. But yeah, Twitter's walked it back to like 5 years ago. Let me see if I can find a link.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, that's scary.
That's depressing.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it.
So- Speaking of going back, I don't know if anybody else looked at the ticket from 2013 when a user asked for this. My thing is they kept it for backwards compatibility, which, okay, I get. But what use is a logging function that modifies the log?
I have a thought on this, and I'm going to tell you my thought, and you can all disagree with me, and that's great. LDAP and DNS were like our original distributed key value stores. Like
Yes.
everybody shoved text records into DNS or like we started doing that. LDAP was like the grand poppy of them all, I think. And so if you had to dynamically modify something, runtime changes or something like that, if you were to potentially just shove a class file into LDAP, which I can't wrap my head around, like that's the solution you came to, but I've done worse stuff. So I can't really like judge, but I'm guessing like someone wanted to, like, I haven't looked at the original ticket, but I could see a case where like, I don't want to stand up NFS, or I don't want to have to rebuild, or I don't want to do all this. And I'm going to shove this into LDAP because that's where I store everything. So that's my thought. I don't know if I'm right or not.
Well, the
I'd
lookup
argue-
I got that part. It was just when it's a logging function, right? Not a configuration function.
Yeah. I'd also argue that the kinds of things that you would interpolate in from LDAP or whatever, you're much better off just doing that as log post-processing rather than doing it on the fly. Because I would be against that because I don't want logging to break just because LDAP is down. And like we all know that 99% of the logs that get written never get viewed ever.
It's true.
And so if 90, and that's probably a low estimate. And if 99% of the logs are never going to get viewed, there's no point in doing the interpolation and having to have beefy LDAP replicas just to serve this up.
Mhm.
And just do it in post. When you do finally have an incident, that's where you run it through Perl or awk or whatever, and smear some awk on it and get the and do the interpolation then. I mean, I'm just always leery of anything that starts with, and now we're going to contact another service, and when that one is down, we're fucked. Especially when it's my logging service, so that it's like, oh, I'm having a problem, and LDAP is down, so now I don't get any logs at all. Sweet.
Or in a worst case, in this case, like it's not down, it's just slow, so your logs are all delayed.
Or dropping lines on the floor.
Mhm.
So you're like, oh great, I'm seeing the beginnings and then nothing.
Well, no, that's
The
a
poor
good point,
JRE
though,
can't
because
win. Like, I mean,
with
like
the-
they
with the
cache
threading
DNS
model-
lookups forever, or log4shell. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much for it to. I mean, maybe that's why there's. I don't know if you saw. There's a DOS CVE as well that came out afterward, and maybe that's this, because you could just have slow responses, and that thing's not even going to drop things on the floor. It's just going to get stuck in the thread, right?
Yeah.
So
Which, by the way, if you haven't heard, there is another CVE for if you only upgraded to 215, you got to go to 216.
oh, good. So once you're aware of these things, like who all is involved in solving these issues with your teams? Is it just like the lone ops person, or do people swarm on it and like developers get involved, or like how do your organizations handle it?
I would say it probably depends on the size of your org.
Mm-hmm.
We're large enough. We're about 800 people, maybe about 300 in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got incident commanders running out of security, coordinating amongst all of the internal and extra customer facing and internal platform teams to ensure coordination with regards to triage. Hey, we're good. Hey, we need to patch. Hey, we're patched.
So do they run it like they run it as a security incident? Does it run similar to your like an outage incident? Is it different in any way?
I don't
the way that it's
exactly
run?
know, because I
Okay.
don't have good visibility into security incident triage, because we
sure.
have different ways in which we classify them, and some are public and some aren't. But I would say it's running very much like a complex distributed incident runs, right? When we've got something that's bad, that's hurting like a ton of teams that need to take action, it's unfolding like that, and it's working reasonably fine. It's at a high cost. Every team's having to burn some amount of calories to triage, even if you say all good under the hood, like nothing to report, no vulns, you're still paying. Every team's paying greater than 0 calories for the org to triage this.
Yeah, so you have a fairly large organization, and so that totally makes sense to have that classification. I'm sure that there's also probably like liability reasons why, given your scale, I would imagine. Like those kinds of things have interesting side effects into the ways that organizations run incidents.
So we have an actual InfoSec team here. We've got about 6,000 people, so a bit larger. And our InfoSec team took charge of this. They broke it down 2 ways. On the weekend, they tried to collect high-risk stuff and have people actually take some action on the weekend, even if it wasn't to fix it, trying to not spoil people's weekends, but also not risk the company. And then anything that was determined not to be high level, so they kind of took the assumption that it was a high risk. Anything that wasn't high risk, start following up during normal working hours, which we have a distributed workforce in multiple countries, so it wasn't just Monday at 8, but it was certainly trying to protect the weekend. And InfoSec took the lead on that, so it wasn't on every group to figure that out. And then then there's like the second layer was how different groups do it, and that's kind of up to them with InfoSec guiding them.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
From my perspective, it worked out pretty well. I was on call. I got hit up, spent about 3 hours on Sunday, which kind of stinks, but this is a big vulnerability. I'm on call. It's honestly more exciting than like dealing with a server down or something, just boring hardware stuff. So there's that.
You have a different definition of exciting than I do.
Well, I mean, I'd rather be paid for something that actually requires me versus something that's like, okay, yeah, hardware's down and data center team will do their thing. Like this was actually novel, needed a human involvement, right? So there was that much for me. But regardless, I got hit up, and then I was actually off Monday, so I got to do the joke somebody did earlier. Hey, what's going on? I miss anything? And but it worked out for our team. They came in and dealt with the things that were left. I had basically just spent maybe 30 minutes putting together a little shared spreadsheet and saying, okay, here's some of the things to start with. On Monday we'll have to all fill it out, but gave a little start to the people who weren't on call.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the teams that focus on only involving humans when they actually need to be involved, rather than just paging them out just because they get paged.
So I have a follow-up question. I'm curious. So right before I left MailChimp, one of the things we had been investigating, well, right before, but like for the last year, was rolling out JFrog's X-Ray. It was really cool for supply chain security, like, for vulnerability scanning. And one of the features it had, and I'm curious if anyone would ever enable this because I don't know that I would actually feel comfortable, is that if your code base had any vulnerability detected through like a CVE or whatever, it would actually block you from passing CI or passing it, like deploying or building an artifact. Has anybody actually ever done that? Or is that something you might be looking at now because of this? I don't know. It seems a little heavy-handed, but I can also see a case where, I don't work at Google-sized companies and I don't have a dedicated team of people who are literally inspecting every component in our supply chain before we decide to use it. So not that I know if Google does that, but I would assume if they aren't building CPUs or whatever, they're doing that. So
I know that we are on, our software is on one of those lists. One of the companies that does that, then they've reached out to us to be like, hey, that thing that you fixed, you actually need to cut a release to make sure that there's a new version so that people can actually install your software full stop. So somebody's using it because somebody's paying these companies.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool.
Sorry, what's that list? Like,
I have to look up the name of it.
Yeah, you don't have to disclose or anything. It's a list of vendors that would have software that gets sent out in CVEs, or
yeah, it basically they watch CVEs against pieces of software, and before you can do an install of that software, you check against them. And as I think JV was just saying, like it will just stop you. Like you can't do an install of software if it's on this list as, hey, has a current security issue, has a current CVE unpatched against it. Stop.
Yeah, like JFrog's X-Ray. So if you're using Artifactory as your artifact management system and you pull all of your artifacts through Artifactory, like your PyPy packages and things like that. And I think a lot of people know I'm a big fan of Artifactory in general, but one of the things that X-Ray will do is if an artifact is pulled through Artifactory, it will compare its version to a CV and see if it's in any CVEs, and it will actually block you from doing it. So if you're building a Docker image and your RPM pass through is Artifactory and it goes to pull in a vulnerable version of libc, it will actually break. It won't serve the package. It's a configurable thing, and a lot of tools can do this, but it's just, I'm curious if anybody has ever actually enabled it. It's a big headache. I'm not going to lie. It felt like when we tried it, it just fell over within the first 30 minutes. Because
sounds extremely interrupt driven. Like
Yeah.
I'd want to run this in permissive mode, right? Like scream like a banshee to let the team know this needs action, but don't block them. Because I could see this being a heartache for a lot of teams where you end up on an enemy list of, I just want to get my stuff done. Life was fine, but a CVE popped Tuesday afternoon and now nobody can build.
Yeah, and especially if you've got like, you know, I'm in a distributed monolith with, you know, tons of dependency chains all over the place. Like, God, I can't imagine if you had, you know, you're trying to sort of onboard a service like that into the kind of historical nightmare that I'm living in, and you know, try to sort out of like, hey, you know, like you're 16 CVEs deep because your next 16 versions that you need to move through are all insecure. And do you like, can you even fix this problem? And you know, I think that there is like an operational reality, especially with like a historical code base of like, you know, there needs to be, you know, you report on the risk, right? Like it's like, here's the risk, you know, the risk manifold that we're at, and this is what you're at currently, and this is how we can mitigate that. But like, at what point do you, like, if it was a greenfield, all greenfield development, yeah, I would love to turn this thing on, make this a requirement, you know, try to go forth from there. But on like even like a year-old, you know, project, there's a wonder of like, can you ever implement something like that? And again, I think that Nick's right. It's like, if it's interrupt driven, like, is that even a reasonable ask of a development team? I don't know.
It reminds me of we had a process at Chef around handling and running with escape defects as incidents. So if somebody was running, say, Test Kitchen, and the cookbooks that they're pulled in a broken thing, and they discovered that there was a bug in a recently shipped version of either the cookbook or the tool set, then we would do all hands on deck, run it like an incident, and handle the escape defect in that way. And this reminds me quite a bit of that. But you know, of course, with with log4j, it's a little more far-reaching than just that part of it.
I think one thing too is that such a behavior in an organization would disincentivize making changes to maintenance mode or dead code, right? When you've got old code that you're not patching, it's going to have vulns, but you're not running builds because you don't care because life's fine. But then a year later, when you're like, we need to go do the thing, and your pipeline's broken, you're disincentivizing the organization from doing the input that was the action item to go make the change to the dead code if you're dealing with the busted pipeline. Now, instead of the small fix the org was willing to do, now you got to like update all your dependencies and get yourself green because X-ray's blocking you. Like, that's a much taller drink of water, and people will back into the shrubs.
I wonder about the legal implications of this, because if you keep delivering code that is insecure, then who gets the boot? The CISO? Whoever approved that we can skip the insecure flag or something like that? Whose responsibility is this? I don't know if probably at some point, if this vulnerability leads to some kind of user information leakage that needs to be revealed or disclosed because of some legislation in some US states, for example, and then the root cause is, okay, the flag was on for keeping this CVE going to production. There's going to be a track.
Well, I'm a strong proponent of not firing people for mistakes, even severe mistakes that could lead to that, because it goes back to the whole idea that our world is complex and the software systems that we've built in our world are complex, and there are so many nuances and decisions that are made, and we may not even know that they were made because it was an insecure default that was set in the original package that was installed in the systems, and nobody knew because you don't go read the source code for, you know, transitive dependency libraries unless you're Google, apparently. Right?
I agree with not firing the people, but there's going to be some kind of accountability if there are financial consequences on the company.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I think some of that will go into like what your organization has written into your SLAs and that sort of thing, like and contractual work you've done with customers. And then whoever is the executive responsible for that line of business, wherever that falls, right? Like, I, like John, I've worked for a lot of smaller companies, and, they don't have multiple operations organizations that have multiple services that reach through different VPs or CISOs or anything like that. So I know that hierarchy and structure can get pretty complicated as to who's responsible. I mean, it really depends on what your regulatory bodies you have that are involved with whatever business you're doing and what those contracts look like.
And that's what I was going to say is, I mean, I'm in a I'm in a regulated environment, and I've been involved pretty closely with developing out what that sort of audit material looks like. And one of the things that I've seen, at least from is, I'm in real money gaming, so from GLI, the gaming licensing organization, is that when it comes to specifically security vulnerabilities and compromises, the understanding is that individual organizations are going to handle those to the best of their ability. And really what all their, the requirement is that you have a documented process, and that documented process has stakeholders. And that's all they can demand of us. That's all that I've seen in terms of like demands. Like, sure, like SOC 2, ISO 27001, like these are more rigorous regimes that have like a higher degree of documentation. But even then, it's not as though that there's like a technical systems requirement behind that, which says like you must have a CVE scraping database that is reporting into your supply chain, that is then, limiting the ability to deploy these, vulnerable softwares into your systems. Like that's nowhere in the documentation or in the things that I've read, at least in my time in this industry, has like pointed to me that said like, oh, that needs to exist. In fact, it's a little scary how light it is in terms of like, we know about this specific vector of attack very well now from multiple different sources over the last 5 to 10 years, and yet we still really haven't come around to a standardized way of dealing with it, in many ways because of the exact things that Josh was stating in terms of like, yeah, reasonable measures, right? Like, how do you get through to reasonable measures? And thank you, JV, for that statement in the chat. Like, what is a reasonable measure? And oftentimes a reasonable measure, it has been, simply documenting the fact that, this is occurring and that you've done something, right? Here's my ticket that states that I've attempted, that attempt was made.
At least you tried.
Right. And like, that's, and there's, I have found that oftentimes it is the impact, at least the monetary impact, is less driven by the news statements around, or rather the statements around like your compromised service, and much more around user perception of your service. Sure, AWS went down real hard and we all got real mad about it. But did I come crawling back as soon as I could? Like, yeah, I needed to do work. And this is, I think, the other harsh reality that I've certainly seen encountered is that you may have a CVE that is dangerous as all hell. But if your business leadership is not interested in informing your user base of that, because let's say that they're lay people, not technical clients, what good is it to you as an organization to then tell them like, hey, we were impacted by this, major CVE, and by the way, service disruptions in the last 24 hours were like because of that. Like, unless you have a very trained and technical staff, like no marketing department in their right mind will ever let you go to Twitter or to public comms with that kind of statement. And this is like, as somebody who's been working in like public facing technologies now for a couple of years, is like, I've never seen it the case where we're interested in informing our user base of what happens behind the curtain. If it's bad enough that a bunch of them can't do stuff, yes, like we'll tell them like, hey, there was an outage where here's the remediation actions we're taking in your accounts. Enjoy your free bets.
So I have this slide deck of incident management training stuff that I've done over the years. And I literally have a slide on here for security incidents, that there are additional considerations for security incidents. There's marketing considerations, like if there's customer data exposure and how to communicate around that. If there's 0-day exploits that need to have that kind of, don't go to Twitter and say that we were down because of this security thing. Talk to marketing about what messaging may be required around that. And then there's also like GDPR and other regulatory things about that. And then there's a whole section that I have on legal considerations, because depending on which country or province or state of which country you're in or do business in, you might have different statutory and regulatory reporting requirements that are different than disclosure requirements, which are different than a whole host of other things. And having legal staff or legal counsel available to be able to handle those. And this is all part of the, when you're an incident commander and you're working on involving other people and communicating with other parts of the organization, like, who do you need to get involved? You might need to get, for a security incident, you might need to get marketing or legal to join. You might need to go find a lawyer real quick if you don't have one on staff to be able to handle something like this. And it, again, it goes back to the world is complex, the systems we run are complex, and there's no one single person in any organization that can keep all of this in their head and be able to have a reasonable response with it. That's why we, have these organizations around to help. Oh, and the last thing on my legal considerations is you might have to involve insurance, because there might be a claim for losses based on whatever the incident may have impacted.
I know. Nick mentioned this, but something interesting. A couple of things I would love to talk about too is the struts issue that hit Equifax, as well as the idea of, that something like PCI, depending on what self-certified or whatever, like, you have different obligations there. I have intentionally throughout my career avoided companies where I was bound by PCI because I didn't want the headache. So I'm curious, for folks who have been in PCI shops, what would something like, would this revoke your PCI certification, or does it matter on the level, which particular level of certification? I mean, I'm just curious.
Would what revoke you? Log4Shell or 10-year-old unpatched struts?
Oh, yes. I mean, like, if
those
you were
are
hit by
two
this
very
because you
different
didn't do due
things.
diligence.
Well, like
I
Log4Shell,
will-
right? Like, we all got caught, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, right? But I think somebody said, like, reasonable measures, right? What you end up doing with a lot of these audits is, as a technical stakeholder, you're arming people to go speak to auditors, right? Like, I don't go sit in front of EY, someone else does that, but I help the people who go sit with EY attest that we've got reasonable measures in place for whatever. And so, and like I said, a several hundred person company, being able to have that conversation with internal folks, you have like your first pass of muster, right? Like, cool, someone can go represent the technical organization with regards to the compensating controls they have in place, or their vuln management policy, or whatever that might be, so that when you do have to go sit with EY or whoever to certify you where the meter's running, like, you ace the test. And you even have some dry runs as well too, right? Like, I think I've worked with, our company went public in the last year, and so you kind of go through kind of like dress rehearsals around this. Like, have we done all the due diligence around all the things we need to do for a certain piece of passing an audit or a certification? And sometimes you come back and, like, it's not good enough. Like, we need to go do more or put more stuff in place. And it's a performative journey.
Yeah, I can't say any names, but I can tell you I've worked with companies that have failed PCI audits for 5+ years running and didn't lose their ability to process cards because they're big companies. And I've also worked with small companies that failed at once and couldn't process any cards. So I don't think pass or fail is why you would lose out on PCI per se.
Yeah, I think
A
that
lot of
the
it has
failure
to do
mode
with
there,
scale.
the failure mode there is that they're like, you failed, you need to take action, but we're not revoking your driver's license, right? You need to go put some stuff in place. And I believe it works very much like you can like extend filing on your taxes. You know, we're still putting the thing together. We're still putting the thing together. So again, it's not there's no guillotine at the end of your, hey, you didn't pass, you can't process cards anymore. It's, you need to go take some post action to get the house in order.
Yeah, and for the smaller companies, it was usually they were new and they wanted to start handling credit cards. The other ones were 40, 50-year-old companies. Nobody wanted to take their ability to process cards away because they brought Visa and company a lot of money.
But the demonstrable stuff's really, really awesome, John, because at a previous company, there was a very large push on PCI, and we had some like old school style like auditors and compliance folks who were like separation of duties and devs can't deploy code and like a lot of shit like that. And some teams were kind of like, okay, cool, that I guess that's the new world order. But what was really interesting is that some of the more forward-looking teams, it really boiled down to like their ability to demonstrate managed risk to those auditors. They're like, oh yeah, developers can log into production, but like here's all the, you know, dead man traps and ways in which we have a feedback loop around what did they do, and a bunch of host IDSs on there, and you know, so if you can tell a story of like, hey, some random rogue bad actor can't go do a bunch of crazy stuff, the auditors who used to have a way of evaluating what success looked like through one lens can be brought around, you know, or are willing to attest that you've got enough controls in place.
I forgot all about that phrase. I haven't heard it in so long time. Compensating controls. So that's. I have to bail. I've got to get ready for another meeting. But it was good to see everyone. I enjoyed the talk. I know I haven't seen some of you in a very, very long time. So, you know, what with the world and trash fires and such. Yeah, keep talking, and hopefully I can make the next one. It's good to see y'all, and I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, John.
I think anybody who's worked on PCI probably doesn't have good words for it, but it is nice that it provides a framework. My issues were more around kind of what you said. Being able to tell a story is nice, but it also meant if you failed your audit, you could always just find another auditor who could let you pass. So it kind of took the teeth out of what should have been a pretty good thing.
Yeah, that was an eye-opening thing for me working at IBM, learning that audit compliance and actual security were not the same thing. And that blew my mind when I was young. Yes, security theater is words that have been used many, many times for many reasons. And yes, it's very much a thing. Does anybody have any closing thoughts on Log4j or shell log or JNDI or anything?
So I don't know, this must have been like 2016. I was at Lone Star Security Conference, and they had a whole talk on building out exactly the kind of CVE capture mechanism that would sort of push CVEs into your Jira instance. So that way you could sort of ticket this stuff out quickly. And that talk has been stuck in my head for the last 5 years, clearly. And I keep thinking about, you know, when we're building out systems, we spend a lot of time sort of investing into CI/CD and developer systems, but I've never really been in a place that wants to run, you know, that it considers the security automation just as much a part of the pipeline as actual building the code, right? And even when we're talking about it right now, with the tools that we're referencing, Dependabot, you know, X-Ray, things like that are sort of security add-ons inside of our pipeline. And we don't really think about, like, we're hoping that the pipeline that feeds those things is also good and clean and comes through. I wonder what's the threshold going to be for the industry as a whole to turn and say like, okay, along with these sort of, my washer, my dry, my CI/CD, my continuous testing, my deployment mechanisms and paradigms, I'm also going to include this vuln chain, right? And have this as a first class representation of my development process. You know, I'm loath to say it won't happen because it's been nearly a decade and we've known about these sorts of things and we've thought about them and nobody's really figured out a good way to do it. And even amongst us, ostensibly some very storied careers here, it's not like there is a ton. Maybe there's one instance in which somebody had a tool that they were talking about that seemed somewhat mature. It seems as though there is like a big gap, and maybe it's because the interrupts are only every couple of months, right? But
not this month.
yeah, not this month. But it seems as though like there is just an overall gap in terms of a set of considerations, and even like I'll say that like in my more mature orgs, yeah, I totally just pushed the stuff up onto InfoSec and was like, yeah, I'll install all the listeners you want on all the hosts you want. Just tell me what I need to do, and you can help me manage this. But yeah. When is it going to change? What's the threshold?
I think if we involve the product owners and make these red CVEs something that affect their delivery metrics, it might change.
Breaking those bills whenever there's a vulnerable dependency in the package or the image, right?
Yeah, if it doesn't bubble up to leadership with a frowny face saying, we are delivering quickly, but this is an unsafe delivery.
Yep.
We need to drive the message there. But that should be part of the shift left movement, right? Because building quality in is putting security at the most left of the software life development cycle. But if the product owner doesn't have the metrics to say, they're not going to acknowledge that somehow they could be doing it better.
Yeah, and having those metrics is important and being able to effectively communicate those things up to upper management to have them understand that this is affecting the bottom line and these are the ways. Having those kinds of effective tools and reporting mechanisms that's the only way we're going to affect real change, is where people who sign the checks are going to want to sign those checks. Well,
I don't have anything to add there, but I do want to say this is the second year in a row now for some of us. Last year was SolarWinds in December. This year it's log4j. Please, I hope everybody's able to take care and not truly spoil their end of year vacation time, rest time.
Yes,
and
totally.
We'll find a way through. There's ways out of this.
Yep.
Especially since somebody pointed out it's a 5-year-old CVE.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're at the top of the hour here, and I do need to get going myself. But I want to thank everybody for joining us and for a wonderfully insightful discussion, and not the insight like fighting type, but the wisdom based type. And I hope that you all have a quiet remainder of the year and a happy holiday season. And as it is the holiday season, we will resume HangOps in January. I'll be out for the next couple weeks. So we'll see you in Slack, and